Thanks everyone. My name's Martin Woodward. Luckily I'm short enough that I can actually slide under these, so this is alright. So Claire asked me to come along and chat about what we saw from a GitHub perspective around modern application development across governments globally. So that's what we're chatting about today. As it says on the slide, I'm a vice president at GitHub, which sounds fancy, but basically it just means I delete email and approve expenses most of the time. But I used to have a proper job, as I say, as an IT consultant, and then I actually owe my career to open source. I did, when I moved to Northern Ireland, when we had a kid. I'm a blow-in, I married into the country like the worst of us. And then when we had our kid, we moved over here. I used to get involved in open source to sort of scratch different itches. And one particular project I was involved in ended up turning into a company with 5 of my friends. So we made that company. I was based in the field. Just if you head up the motorway towards Belfast, keep going towards Derry. When the motorway stops, that's where I live. So and we were just sat there. All my rest of my friends were in America, and we did this open source company. We ended up selling it to Microsoft back in 2009, and then went over, worked for Microsoft, thinking I was going to maybe last a couple of years, just get my kind of the money you get for selling a company, which I still had the same mortgage in the same house, so it wasn't a huge amount of money. But when we did that, I thought I wasn't going to last there that long, but because my company was involved in open source, and to sell our company to Microsoft, we had to help them get through a lot of their open source kind of rules and regulations. Ended up accidentally getting involved in helping Microsoft do open source better and change how it approached open source. So did that for a bit, and that's when I met Claire, when I was doing some of that sort of work. And that was cool, because we actually got to do some of this same modernization initiatives that actually we see governments doing now. Because it was, a business that was built very differently. It was a business that didn't understand open source. It was a business that had, it had lots of IP in its organisation, and it felt it couldn't make this available. It had everything that we see. So that was cool. And then created a GitHub account. Thought, hey, let's get up for Microsoft, and thought, oh, GitHub's cool. So I ended up buying GitHub, and that's why I'm at GitHub now. So we're going to chat about application development. Yeah, right. So as I mentioned, I live here, just at the top of the loch there. Get the train down, which is quite nice. There's where I live, and as I say, I live in a field in the middle of beautiful rural Randallstown, is the township I live in. And it's fantastic. I have even though I just would like to live near anywhere really, that's further than you think, that house. I have a trench down here where my little fibre connection runs, and thanks to the investment we made in fibre rollout, as long as I rolled it down to the telegraph pole, which is just about here, which is a kilometre away, I was able to get a fibre connection to my property. Amazing! And so now I'm able to live and work in this field, contributing money to the economy, contributing money to the local, the tax. So that's great. As we're from a little cupboard in the middle of rural Northern Ireland, we get to observe kind of different trends with modern application development. And we see the apps of the future are changing, and the way that we build them is also changing in the way it's affected how we build everything that we see. So when customers expect modern experiences, we expect to be able to use our smartphones when accessing things. We expect to be able to get services 24/7. And when we look at the software of the future, these are the common trends we see across all of industry as well as in government. So the most important thing is the software of the future should be centered around the citizen experience, the customer experience. And it's too easy to forget about that as technologists, and equally when I see strategies or policies that are about kind of building big architectures, building big systems, and the focus very much on the architecture of a system, to me that's a smell around this policy, because it's kind of losing sight of the citizen, of the customer, of why they're doing it. Every time you see kind of a solution that succeeds, whether it's open source or proprietary, it succeeds because it's solving the customer pain the best way possible, and in the most effective way. If you don't focus on solving the customer pain, you might end up with as we talked about in the panel, you might end up with the best architected, most amazing, technologically superior system that nobody uses, and you might end up being a nation of Betamax owners, for people who remember like digital cassette players. Some people are too young. That's what we had before DVDs, which you probably don't remember either. That's what we had before Netflix, postage things. Right. So focus on customer experience. We also see them using cloud-native technologies. I say cloud-native technologies, I don't mean like everything shouldn't be deployed to one public cloud, but we saw already, lots of people moving to container-based strategies, lots of people moving to those sorts of, using Redis and all these sorts of things, and combining being able to run it on-prem with being able to run it in a vendor-neutral way in the cloud. That's essential when you're building public services, because not only do you need to keep suppliers keen, you need to make sure that no one vendor feels they've got the lock-in of your whole country's business. You also need to be able to work with vendors and suppliers who have different preferences. You need to work with different solutions across all. So having cloud-native experiences and cloud-native solutions is where we see people having success, but not deployed to any single cloud. Obviously, we're seeing intelligence go more and more. We saw earlier on about using AI on images to be able to detect if you've got the right crops in your field or if you're doing the right things. We use AI a ton to be able to do validation of documents, to be able to summarize conversations that a customer has had with an agent, to be able to do those sorts of things. What we never use intelligence for, and what we shouldn't use intelligence for, is in actual decision making. So this is a tool to equip people to be able to make decisions, but the decision maker is somebody who needs to have that authority and stay in that position, and that's something that's important to, as you're rolling out intelligent applications, to make sure you're doing them in a responsible and an ethical way that still has, you are enabling the decision maker to make more efficient decisions, not removing decision makers as you do that sort of stuff. And then, but the decision makers today do a lot of admin work that they really don't need to be doing. I did like some work in legal systems and things like this, and or passport processing or stuff like that. You should just be able to make the decision, not spend your entire time collecting all the evidence. And then finally, but that's the whole reason we're here, is that it's built on the foundation of others' work. And I deliberately phrased it that way, not built on open source. I'm an open source zealot. I owe my entire career to open source. I owe my kids' future to open source. But it's built on the foundation of others' work. So that could be open source, sure. That could be commercial off-the-shelf products as well. It's other people's work. That can be what we call inner source as well. So sharing between departments, sharing between different parts of the industry, but it's not in a public way. That would be what you know as inner source. It doesn't matter. The point is that you're building on the foundation, the work of others to then build your next step. You're not reinventing everything from scratch. And that's common traits we see about software as it's being built and being successful at being built, let's put it that way. The citizens, as I say, they expect always-on services, they expect mobile-friendly, they expect efficiency. Ireland has the leaders of this, in the world. Irish businesses, and we have a lot of businesses investing in Northern Ireland. That's why we have all that nice money that comes in terms of corporation tax and stuff. But that means we've got the experts globally in running online services, the experts globally in sort of streamlining these services and helping not automate people out of jobs, but helping free people up to be able to focus on helping the people with needs. Is what we're doing as an industry, and what we should be doing with the public sector. And also, as we're doing this, you don't build a modern engineering system without modern engineering methods. Tony was talking a bit about this in the session before the panel. You need to do DevOps. You need to do things in an iterative way. You need to figure out how somebody had a question about what if you roll out a service and it goes disastrously, that'll break public trust. And yeah, it will. So don't roll out a big thing that could fail really badly. Roll out a small thing that doesn't do that much, that can't fail that badly, but can get some success. Iterate, improve, see where it goes. The UK are looking at doing their digital, driving license infrastructure. There's no way it would be politically acceptable in the UK to do a digital identity card, because that whole identity card thing is just completely goes against the moral fibre of lots of Daily Telegraph readers and Conservative voters and things like that. I just don't believe in that existing. But sure, they'll take a digital driving licence, maybe they'll take a digital passport, maybe they'll then say, well, wouldn't it be great if my digital driving licence had a flag on it that also meant I could, share it with my mobile phone carrier and use it as identity, have flags on it that say my NHS number, and then all of a sudden it becomes a digital identity card by the back door, you know what I mean? But don't quote me. So it's, there's different ways of introducing it. It's the same with areas like Germany and things as well. Germany has very, very rightly, culturally, hugely sort of strict provisions around privacy and around a deliberate lack of trust of some of the government and being able to ensure individuals can, hold the government to account. That's just a cultural thing. So, we have to do that, we have to build those methods, but when we look at these modern tools, we do have to use tools and systems that work well. DevOps is clearly the way, building things iteratively on top of open source is the way people build apps nowadays. So, the reason why Claire invited me is because she knows I'm a nerd, and one of the things I like doing is looking at data. I tend to make a lot of database decisions in my job. So, what I want to do is pull some data for you together, and then we'll chat a bit about what this all means. So, first of all, this is, as Claire mentioned this morning, this is open source contribution across the entire world and the growth of open source contribution. And we can see, obviously bright lights over in America. We see a very, very bright light over here in India. India is looking like it's actually going to overtake the United States in terms of sheer developer numbers by about 2027, if current rates grow the way they're going. And there's certainly a very, very high sense of entrepreneurialism coming out of the Indian sector as well. When you go meet those people when you're on the ground, people are very, very keen to move forwards. And they've still got a large population, they've got good education systems. So yeah, lots going on. We notice in Europe it's okay. We see that Germany's growing a bit more than elsewhere because it's slightly darker green. And we'll notice that Ireland's slightly less green than the UK in terms of, and that's because it's growing about 19%, whereas the UK is just a bit more. Yes, sir?
Is that like total number of developers?
This is actually total number of developers, but actually in growth terms as well. It's fascinating. So yeah, that's total number of developers. Great segue, because what's more interesting is when that total number of developers. So UK is 4 million developers growing year over year, 19%. There are about 356,000 developers in Ireland, so the UK grows an island every year. Well, it actually goes 3 islands every year in terms of developers. So how on earth can we keep up, if that's going on? Well, we don't have to. If we look actually Irish open source, this is a heat map of all of the open source contribution that's happening on the island of Ireland this month. I did this last night, this query. And we can see, it's really interesting actually, because you sort of see, up here you see Dundalk, you see, that'd be Galway, isn't it? And then Cork as well, I guess, yeah. Belfast. I'm quite proud. There's a bright spot up there. That's where I live. So I'm hoping that's me personally. And then that'd be Coleraine, I guess, where the fire comes in. So yeah, anyway, fascinating stuff. I've actually got Virgin American to zoom in a bit more, but I'm not allowed to show that for PII reasons. But yeah, it's cool. So we can go in and have a look. That's contribution. 356,000 developers. It's only the 55th largest developer community. But actually, if you look at people per capita, it's the 15 largest developers in the EU, but it's the 6th highest EU devs per capita, and that's when you work out how many people within working age. we have, because again, you have to factor in that, you know, there was a generation within Ireland that sort of, you know, around my age, that kind of a lot of people left the country, and so it's like working age people, 6 highest. So that's fascinating to see. So actually, maybe we're doing okay now. So we're no longer like this small, you know, small country that can't possibly compete. We're probably at about like a C or a B grade in terms of, you know, how we can compete on the industry, knowing that we have a ton of investment and knowing that we have actually some secret assets around the M50 because of all the data centers that are around there and all the car parks full of shipping containers and things. Not enough power, but we've got lots of shipping containers. Yeah.
Do you know offhand how Europe, like if you define Europe as EU plus, plus Britain plus Iceland or whatever, just like those 30 countries or so, in aggregate, how does that region look compared to say the States or China or India?
Yeah, so the question was if you combine Europe, the land mass, rather than and not worry about like EU membership and all that nonsense, which I wish I could, but passport's not as useful as it was, then it's actually still below both the US, it's above China in terms of the the work that we see, but it's well below India as well. Brazil is actually higher as well. Yeah, so, but it's still a big thing. But talking about that, what's really interesting, I think, this is the league table of devs per capita across the EU. And you know what you notice is you see, like here we are, Sweden and Denmark would have. Is it Denmark? I think no, Denmark and Finland. They have very, very similar like population sizes to Ireland. They're only just a little bit bigger. Estonia's tiny. Estonia has, you know, a lot less people than we do. So and then the Netherlands, you know, again is up there, very, very high. So it's not just the small countries in terms of devs per capita, which is interesting. So yeah, so that's cool stats. Right, in terms of trading economies, this is Irish. This is where in our open source collaboration, who do we most often collaborate with? And we can see, as we economically know, we have a very, very close tie with the United States. People in the UK like to talk about their special relationship with America. They ain't got nothing on Ireland in terms of special relationships. But we see that here, which obviously was a massive asset and is, you know, worrying as a liability, but you know, it is a huge, you know, it's been an asset to us historically. We see then the mainland, you know, GB there, and then obviously EU. If you combine all the EU states there, and we also see some, you know, collaboration with India, with the Ukraine and things. If we compare that now with, say, the German open source trading in terms of like how much open source they share with, you see a much more equal distribution between the United States and the rest of the EU. So if I go back one, there's Ireland again, lots, and then the EU. We can see, you know, much more equal, and then again there's some GB trading. And then next up here as well, if I see UK trading, well, I've not put the EU together because you can actually see US, Germany, France is up here, Netherlands, and then I put Ireland up there in terms of how much it is.
How do you measure these metrics?
This is based on in a pull request. So in GitHub is a common place where you do open source sharing. When you do a collaboration, when you do a commit, this is where that came from and went to in terms of where the IP addresses were of the people beginning the commit and where the IP addresses were of people accepting the commit.
So on one side it's the person doing the pull request.
Yeah, exactly, receiving, that sort of thing. Yeah, the person hitting there. Right, and then I'm going to whip through some more data. So this is the data that people have been talking about a lot today. This is the World Intellectual Property Organization, their Global Innovation Index. We see Ireland up. I don't know, it's up there, Ireland, in terms of where it sits. Quite a rich country now. Below this line here, which is the median of how well we're actually doing when you compare GDP with innovation, so we could do better. So what I then did was look at the countries above that line and try to draw some commonalities in terms of what they're doing, you know? And they're all focusing on, in terms of e-government, focusing on citizen needs. Nearly all of them now have open source software development by default. There's a difference as well between by default and like mandating, and there's different levels of that, but you know, they do open by default. Open data came before open source in many extents, but open data is very, very common. Well, what you also notice some attributes, like there's high cyber resilience in those high-performing tech companies. Estonia, again, you know, is the most cyber resilient country in the world because it's had lots of practice. And then we also see in some of the regions, sovereign tech accelerators, funds, we'll talk about those in a bit. We're seeing increasingly the need to bring software development experience in-house to be able to have leadership and decision-making authority, be able to do that within the government department, just like Tony was telling us about. That's critical to success, otherwise your suppliers can, you know, hold you to ransom, and they can also kind of do games where they'll spec a system and then make them profit up in terms of change requests and things like this, because everybody knows customers don't know what they want at the beginning of the contract, because if customers knew what they wanted, they wouldn't need me, we wouldn't need developers, you know, we're all build systems. And then finally, we also see them actually fostering some public service responsibility. If we look at some common mistakes, the main one that's again a smell that I mentioned is too much. I call it architecture astronauting. But like when you see big architectures, you see big designs, that sort of thing. That's where you see somebody failing down here. I don't want to name country names, especially when they're powerful and they're quite rich and things. But yeah, they tend to do kind of some splashy funds. They might have like a blockchain, whatever, or you actually see some AI accelerators and things like this, where they make big headlines, spend lots of stuff, but are they actually delivering services to the end user? Nope. So they've lost that centering on the public, centering on what citizens need. And then you notice that you also notice you see lots of initiatives around kind of open, but they put their community into ghettos of nationality or ghettos of silos of knowledge. And that means that, say, if you do that and you speak, I'm going to make up a language, you know, you speak Esperanto, there we go, and you're an Esperanto-speaking nation. If you are in your own national silo of Esperanto-speaking, the only people that know about you and know how to collaborate with you are fellow Esperanto speakers. And that's not what you want from an open source community. You want to be part of that global conversation. And so actually we find that they tend to not lead to innovation. It becomes basically a measure of inner source sharing within inside that organization, which is fine, but it doesn't allow you to get the full benefits of open source. And then finally, I do notice a trend when you have devolved government systems or federal government systems where actually that tends to slow down some of those procurement processes, presumably, and so the innovation and being able to create openness actually gets slowed down by these systems rather than sped up, whereas a country like Ireland, who has the ability to make decisions but still has regional delivery, is in a great position. Okay, so I want to do some quick case studies. If you want to go do some more research, quick photo to snag. This is the UN e-government survey, so I'll wait you grab that a second. So you can go get all this information yourself, really. But it's got some different scorecards of how people kind of behave, you know, stack up. Using common traits, you notice collaboration, again, is very high. We also notice if you look at the countries leading that e-government index, Denmark, Estonia, Singapore, well, what we notice is actually some of these countries that have the leading number of developers per capita, we're noticing a high correlation between that and the numbers of countries that lead on the e-government index, even though they're completely separate measures. So that's interesting and in the data, so there seems to be some correlation there. Another thing for you to look up, as I'm giving you resources, is we talked a lot actually about the UN's work and UNICEF's Office of Innovation. Again, building common standards and practices of which share, reuse and improve is key. Design for inclusion is key. Creating transparent practices is key. We take it for granted that our government is reasonably, you know, not corrupt. Somebody had a question about PPE and things. We'll not talk about that. But in terms of, you know, reasonably transparent and open. And then we've talked a lot about today, so I'm just going to skip this. This is around the potential for digital public goods. We see that happening a lot, especially in India. So what I wanted to do there was quickly give you some top highlights, and then I'm going to finish. So the first one is around, oh yeah, sorry, this is the last thing to look up if you want open source ability service. Right. Sovereign Tech Fund from Germany, awesome fund, does some stuff around what this is open to anybody in the world actually to take part in, not just people in Germany, even though it says it's a Sovereign Tech Fund, and allows fellowships. It's been doing great work, that's successful. Within France, they've got an initiative called Blue Hat, which is basically picking out champions, open source champions within the French state, helping them roll that out. That's fantastic. We also have, we've talked a lot about Estonia. Estonia reached a milestone in December. They are now 100% digital. Divorce was the last thing that went digital, so you can now get divorced digitally. These don't sound my life because I haven't been home for a long, long time. And then we talked a bit already about UK Gov. I'm probably biased. The GDS has a fantastic system in terms of how they roll things out. They kind of led the world in this, and also in fostering a culture of responsibility within people contributing. And they've just released a new public policy paper around public sector services. Basically, they're trying to do a lot more joined up stuff, which is where this digital driving license stuff's coming along, and then also harnessing, not being afraid of AI, not trying to legislate AI out of the way, but how can we leverage AI for our citizens' good, not for the good of whatever, the sake. Okay, and then what I want to do, with 2 minutes to go, is play a 2-minute long video.
OHC stands for Open Healthcare Network. We're a team of enthusiastic developers and contributors committed to building open technology, especially in the healthcare domain.
The ratio of number of doctors and nurses in India is not compatible to the actual number of people who is required. The more time they are able to save, that's the time they can spend with the patient.
OHC built Care, which is our open source flagship product. We identify hospitals and connect them to the closest care center. The doctors or the specialists get a complete picture of how the patient is doing, and if the doctors feel that they need to be moved, then they have a referral system through the software that tracks the journey of the patient.
I'm not doing the miracles, but I'm just giving some tips of life-sustaining techniques. So that's how driving me and our team more and more.
Early on, we were very fortunate to have active participation from healthcare professionals. They're the ones telling us what to build, how to build.
The engineer told me how I can contribute on myself. I am writing the special issue of I need this button there so that I can have better accessibility of shifting a patient. Within 1 week, I see a link to the finished product. That is when I really saw the magic.
We have more than 400 people contribute from around the world. The developers were very interested. They were like, okay, there's a request from a doctor, we have to go solve it for him. Then they pick up the issue, then they actually go and build it.
We have seen the quality of code improve immensely with Copilot. So it's almost like everybody's gotten their own personal assistant.
I just have to say what I want in a few comments, and it's able to write out the entire thing for me. It's like another human helping me out. Having everything in open source from day one actually improves the trust.
When OHC came in, suddenly I realized that the small decision I make, the small issue that I file, now it's impacting millions.
This healthcare transformation created a very significant positive impact to every citizen of India.
Okay. So, the key of this is, if you want to know what the future is going to be like, it's already here. It's already out there. It's just unevenly distributed. Everybody's experts in different parts around the world. So look outwards, but realise as well, you've got an amazing education system. You've got great digital infrastructure. You've got people that care about each other. And you also have a wide diaspora which you can take advantage if you work in a global world. So just like India did, make sure you lean on that diaspora. And with that, thank you very much.